Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm the Book Guy and I'm excited to be starting our new monthly theme of Discovery December, looking at fantasy books that are not set in the common European setting. Today we are looking at The Poppy War by Rebecca Kuang. The trilogy is set in a fantasy China, specifically the Song Dynasty, and it draws a lot of real-world parallels with real history. And today we're going to see if this series is going to be the right one for you to read. But I want to address something straight out of the gate. This is not a young adult series, it is a Grimdark series. This means it will have a ton of gruesome violence and dark themes and some pretty extensive content warnings. Trigger warning for this video. I'm saying this up front because if you look up The Poppy War first book on Goodreads, it is saturated with negative 1-star reviews, and they all say the same thing. I thought this was young adult, but it's actually grimdark, 1 star. Which is just kinda loopy to me. So if the book didn't meet your expectations, it just means your expectations were wrong, right? Doesn't mean the book was bad. I first read The Poppy War during all the hype a few years ago, and I remember that the first book had a really low Goodreads rating of 3.8 because of all the negative reactions. Now, it's since got up to 4.17, which is closer to where it should be. But why did everyone think it was young adult? We'll talk about that later. Now let's look about what this grimdark story is all about. Fang Runin, or you can call her Rin, is a war orphan. Her parents died in the Poppy War. Now her foster parents sell opium in a den where she lives as a child. But they're gonna save Rin from a life of poverty by arranging a child marriage for her.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Rin has other plans for her life. She's not going to live a life in the slums like everyone else. Instead, she studies in secret, educating herself so she can pass the test to get accepted into Synagard, the Imperial Military Academy. Everyone judges her for her dark skin and her rural accent and her humble background, but she will learn how to fight and wage war and even unlock shaman abilities to call down the power of the gods. Rin's country is currently being invaded by the Mugen Federation, and these guys use scorched earth tactics, bringing a reign of terror and brutality. Rin must become a weapon with equal terror and brutality if she is to stop their onslaught. So as I mentioned, this story is set in a fantasy version of China during the Song Dynasty. Now, in real life history, the Song Dynasty went from 960 to 1279. Yet even though the aesthetics and the style of the fantasy world is based on the Song era, there's a lot of events from different points of history, which we'll talk about later in a history segment. And there's different technology from different eras as well. So this world is sort of a weird amalgamation of different parts of China through the ages. The first thing you'll probably notice about this world is the languages. The names and places don't fit the English lexicon, as you would expect. Now, this may be off-putting and even alienating for some readers, but it can also be mesmerizing. Every name is unique for many of us English speakers, so it can help the world feel more real and transport us with greater effect than usual. I do appreciate that all of these names are still pretty easy for an English audience to understand and pronounce. They're authentic yet simple, and I think Rebecca Kuang has obviously picked names that aren't too difficult for us English plebs to handle. You're also going to see a vastly different culture and decor to what we normally see in European fantasy. The clothing, architecture, and just the look of everything is distinctly Song Dynasty China. I won't go into too much detail, but it is a real joy to explore this world through this trilogy. And it's very immersive to travel somewhere so different. And of course, this is a fantasy, so the coolest part of the world will always be the magic. I want to explain the magic here, but there may be very slight spoilers, so be warned. Basically, the magic in this world comes from the gods. The mortals have to prove their worthiness and dedication through some pretty nasty trials. Once they have proven themselves, one of the gods in the pantheon will choose them as a vassal for their power. And the human does not get a say in which god chooses them and what power they get. They take what they are given. Blessing or curse. There is a huge cost to have magic in this world. That's why everyone doesn't have it. For one, the only way to commune with your god and receive their power is through meditation and drugs. That's where the poppies come in. The poppy flower gets you high enough to talk with your god, hence the poppy war. Shamans warring with each other, using the power of gods and wielding them at their beck and call. Just keep in mind, the god that chooses you will also seek to control you. You basically sell your soul to get a higher power, and the gods are merciless. Every time you use their power, the god gets just that little bit more control of you. Not to mention, the poppy drug can turn you into an addict and weaken your mind even further, so that you lose yourself completely. Between the poppy drug and the controlling deity, it's a very difficult journey to keep your humanity intact. Let's talk about characters because they are the primary focus of this story. Yes, there is a war and there is some epic magic, but this trilogy remains a character drama. What we see in this story is a lot of character changes. So it's basically character arcs, but a little bit more extreme. You should also know many of these characters are not morally good. This is a little bit of a Game of Thrones situation where everyone is just a little bit evil, or a lot bit evil. This is largely because of the war part of the Poppy War title. These are people whose morality has been challenged by the horrors of war. Now, let's look at our main cast, and note these are Chinese names, which means the family name comes first. Fang Runin, or Rin, a war orphan who has climbed by her fingernails out of the gutter of society and into a place of power and potential. Rin works harder than everyone else, that's her whole thing. She doesn't care for societal expectations or peer pressure or limits, and as a war orphan, she cares about seeing those who commit injustice pay for their crimes. Though she's a little bit zealous about that.
Calm down, Anakin.
Yin Nezha. This guy is Rin's classmate, and it's kind of hilarious. Everything Rin had to work for so hard, Nezha was given by right of his birth. So they kind of despise each other because they're at the same level and they hate to admit it. Nezha is devoted to family and duty and law, yet he will also question that devotion because of Rin and her more chaotic approach. Shen Kitei. So this guy is not the most gifted fighter, but definitely is the most gifted strategist. Kitei is a military super genius. He would much rather be a scholar than studying at a military base. You might consider him the closest thing the story has to a morally good character, so naturally he has a bad time. And Master Jiang. So this guy is one of the crazy, goofy teachers, as you often get in a magic system. He doesn't take on any students. Of course, we all know the best mentors are a little bit weird, right? Yeah, except this guy has some big secrets and a dark past. The first main plotline of the story is the quintessential magic school. Now, technically, it's a military training institution or an academy, but every reader is just going to see this as another Hogwarts. Unfortunately, a lot of readers misjudge the series because of this trope, including me. I got bored reading Act 1 of Book 1 because I thought it's just another magic school trope. Not to be confused with a magic school bus.
Please let this be a normal field trip.
Now, I might be biased here, but I think everything after the magic school is brilliant. The school plotline is actually not bad, it's just a little bit tropey. And it has a huge amount of setup for the characters, the magic system, the world, etc. from that point onwards. The payoff is after that point. Unfortunately, you do kind of need to push through. Alright, so the real big plot here is the war and the invasion of the Mugen Federation, and all of the war crimes that come with it. This is a historically accurate depiction of war, specifically a war of invasion, where one force conquers civilian populations. Now, this plot is not just dark and brutal, because that alone is not enough to actually excite us to read a series. No one's going, yay, war crimes, right? Right? No, this plotline is genuinely fantastic writing, because there are real stakes. It's not just some vague, the world will be destroyed if you fail type threat. We see exactly what the Federation will do if they are not stopped. I personally have rarely been this invested in a plotline success or failure. However, just looking a little deeper into the trilogy and into books 2 and 3, there is a new big plotline of a civil war. Rin and her allies plan on overthrowing an evil tyrant and saving their country. Unfortunately, civil wars are messy as hell. And there's also a foreign power called the Hesperians who are looming. You see, the Hesperians are technologically superior and they're very religious, borderline zealots. They want to offer aid to this weakened country who's in a bad state, but everyone kind of knows this aid offer is just an excuse for them to get a foot in the door and slowly and subtly take over the country. The civil plotline war is masterfully done. There's real military strategy involved. Yay, military strategy! So there's none of those dumb military decisions you often get in a fictional story that are just done to create drama. There's no poor logic or plot holes in this. This has smart strategy. Also, the blending of magic into a realistic civil war is very well balanced. The magic doesn't turn into a super cool fantasy battle all of a sudden. It's still gritty and harsh. The magic doesn't fix everything, even though it adds a lot to the story. Finally, the threat of those Hesperians adds even more tension to an already tense situation. If the country is too weak after their civil war, they're not going to be able to win freedom for their country after all. The Hesperians will move in.
Under new management.
I love stories that have tension coming from multiple sources, because the tension doesn't get added together, it gets multiplied, and the whole story is more interesting for it. There's something else I need to make very clear about the Poppy War. Yes, I swear the Poppy War has the absolute wrong reputation. First people thought it was YA, and now they think of it as intense grimdark. What they should think of it as is the incredible quality of writing on so many levels. So first, the prose is gorgeous. Line by line, the language is a perfect balance between clear and effective communication that gets to the point and sheer evocative beauty and art. Many young authors tend to write melodramatic prose, yet Ms. Kwong dodged that problem entirely. Also, the character writing is incredible. We live in the head of Rin and see her characterization so clearly. I feel like I could sit down right now and write an essay about her personality because of how well I understand it from reading the series. That's how deep she is. The characters are so distinct from each other as well in morality and in personality. Also, Miss Kwong's action scenes are incredible. Yet another example of a female author writing fantastic action scenes and dispelling that crappy myth. It's never just action with a lot of movement and stuff happening. This is tense action with real risks and real consequences. And that tension is intense.
This is tense!
I was reading one scene in book 3. It was a certain battle at night, and it was raining. You know the one? It was so tense, and I got so excited, I literally had to stop, put the book down, and take some very deep breaths. The build-up was just relentless.
The suspense is terrible.
So her balancing of plot and characters is superb. No matter how big the plot lines go and how epic the battle and the war becomes, it's still a character-focused story. I loved reading scenes where the plot was dramatically shaped by the choices of the characters in the moment. So that's the trade-off here. The Poppy War does have a reputation for violence and brutality, but the quality of everything else is so high. If you can stomach the horror, you'll love the series. Oh, let's talk about the horror. Many of the plotlines in the story mirror real history. There are two major events that feature in the Poppy War. The first is the Opium Wars, which some of you might have guessed already. The Opium Wars were two separate conflicts between Britain and China in 1839 and in 1856. The title itself, The Poppy War, is a reference to that. The second event that the story is based off is the Second Sino-Japanese War from 1937 to 1945. The conflict in the story is largely based off that event. Now, the plot lines are not retellings of these events. Think of it more like the setting for the plot. So just knowing these historical events will not spoil anything for you. For example, example, there was a moment where I was reading the book and enjoying a lot of the history parallels. Then I see a few similarities and I go, oh no, we're about to see a parallel of the Nanjing Massacre, and I know exactly what we're about to see. Then later there's a hint of torture, and I go, oh no, it's that historical event.
Uh-oh.
Don't tell me. We're about to go over a huge waterfowl.
Yep.
So I was fortunate to know some of the history of this beforehand, so I was a bit prepared for just how violent it was going to be. But many readers did not, and then overreacted and left negative reviews on Goodreads because of graphic violence, yet Rebecca Kuang did not make up any of this. This is a grimdark story, not because the author made it so, but because history made it so. These real events are grimdark as f***. The events of the Opium Wars and the Sino-Japanese War are widely known by the majority of Chinese people, but they're almost never discussed in the Western world. Unfortunately, most schools and most countries have a tendency to only teach their own history, and I think that sucks. So I love a book that covers world history beyond what we normally know and helps expose this to more people. Alright, I'll do a history tangent for you and talk about these real events. Just keep in mind, this is dark history, and also history is complicated, so this is a simplified version. Let's go. So the East India Trading Company started trading with China in the 17th century. Among their trade goods was opium. Now, they originally sold it as a medicine, and that's why people bought it, yet it quickly became a mass addiction for the population of China. The emperor of the time outlawed the opium trade, yet it continued illegally. In fact, 4 separate emperors came into power, made a decree saying opium's still illegal, guys, and no one listened. Over the course of 100 years, the British just kept selling it. Finally, one emperor appointed an official imperial commissioner to deal with the problem. The commissioner started by writing a letter to Queen Victoria and a letter to the British public, pleading with them to stop the trade because it was negatively affecting so many Chinese. The British ignored the plea. So the commissioner seized a shipment of opium from the British. He did pay for it, albeit a low amount, and then destroyed it all. The British responded by sending a navy into the bay of that city and opening fire with cannons on a civilian population.
Seems like an overreaction.
That first Opium War took 3 years. It ended with China having to surrender, give Hong Kong to the British for 150 years, as well as free unlimited access to 5 different ports. Then, about 15 years later, there was an incident with the boat called Arrow. So Arrow, the boat, had been stolen by pirates. The Chinese captured it, kicked off the pirates, and then resold it to the British. Unfortunately, a second group of Chinese didn't get the memo, recaptured the ship thinking they were pirates, and took everyone captive. Worse, the British had been flying the Union Jack at the top of the ship. The Chinese thought it was a fake by the pirates, took it down. Eventually they realized their mistake, let the British go, no one was hurt. However, the British were insulted by the disrespect shown to their flag. They responded by sending an army and launching the Second Opium War. Turns out they actually weren't happy with the treaty from the first one and wanted to renegotiate it anyway.
Are we the baddies?
Also, a French missionary was killed, so France decided to jump on in this action and joined with Britain in the Second Opium War.
Are we the baddies?
After 4 years, China surrendered again and was forced to legalize opium and give 10 ports to Britain and France. They also had to pay enormous sums of money as recompense to both governments for the cost of the war. Meanwhile, opium addiction skyrocketed like never before. Yet, that has nothing on the Second Sino-Japanese War. This war officially started in 1937, although it had been building up for a few years. Imperial Japan invaded mainland China and stayed there for nearly 8 years. This war overlapped with World War II because that was happening at the same time, but they never quite interacted. Later, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor and fought with America in the Pacific, but that conflict was still pretty separate to the one in China mainland. This war in China is sometimes called the Asian Holocaust because over 20 million Chinese civilians were killed. In the regular Holocaust, there were 11 million killed, by comparison. Most infamously, at the start of the war, Japan conquered the Chinese then capital, Nanjing. Then they committed the Nanjing Massacre. Basically, the Japanese army had suffered a lot in taking the city, so when they conquered it, they lost all decorum and order. The soldiers went through the city committing mass murder, rape, and torture at will on an unguarded civilian population. The Japanese generals and the emperor's son were there, but they let it happen and made no effort to restore restore order. So this continued for over a month and a half, and it was just about the worst thing imaginable. Also, oh geez, we're not done yet. This war included the actions of the infamous Unit 731. If you've ever spent any time in the darkest pits of the internet, you will have heard of these guys. They did scientific experiments on Chinese civilians, and it was bad. You should not research this further unless you are prepared to be utterly disgusted.
Are we the baddies?
The worst part is that when the Americans took over and won the war and realized what this group were up to, they literally let every single one of these war criminals go in exchange for their research.
Are we the baddies?
Well, that's enough of that. So that's a bit of the world history that is covered in the Poppy War, though technically there is still the Chinese Civil War that followed World War II, and that's also mirrored in Poppy War. That Civil War happened immediately afterwards and resulted in the death of 1.5 million civilians. You know what? That's enough atrocities for one day.
Woo! Okay, kids, let's settle down and review the important information.
So I hope all of that gives you an idea of what to expect from this series. That will make you more aware of the subject matter we're talking about here. And it will help you understand why this book was written, because those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. And many of these events are being repeated today in the real world. And war that involves a civilian population will always have the highest toll, because of the high number of innocent bystanders.
Little kids, cripples, old ladies. In fact, except for a few of the brass, almost everybody involved is an innocent bystander.
Well, hopefully that will explain why this is not a young adult series. Let's talk about that. There's a couple of reasons why I believe people assumed this was a young adult series. The first being, Rebecca Kuang sold this book when she was just 20. Not 20 anything, 20. That's how young she was. And she didn't just sell it, it was auctioned. So at just 20, Rebecca Kuang had impressed her agent so much that the agent set up an auction for publishers to bid on her book, because they all knew this was going to be the next best thing. This is a huge accomplishment. In fact, I'm 33 and I've never had a publisher make any offer on any of my books. So clearly, Rebecca Kuang is a super genius writer, and it's kind of offensive how good she is.
Fake laugh, hiding real pain.
But yes, because she is a young author, many people assumed it was a young adult book. Also, the characters are young. That's another common trait for young adult fiction. We assume that a book is for the people at the same age of the protagonist. But I also think this was assumed to be YA because the author is a woman. Let's look at some stats here, straight out of Wikipedia. This is an outline of how many male and female authors there are writing in these categories of fantasy fiction. Now, the Poppy War is historical high fantasy, the top category on this chart, and as you can see, there are a lot fewer women published here. Yet, if you look a little bit lower in the young adult section, a massive 68% of young adult writers are female. This is a little bit of my opinion here, but I do think that a lot of female authors are pushed to the YA area, and a lot of male authors who write YA are kind of pushed up to the regular section. There is a gender bias here in how male and female authors get marketed, and how they are perceived by their audience. This is another tangent, but I'm currently reading Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, which are mega YA bestsellers at the moment. The truth is, the content in these two books is far more adult than a lot of the adult series I read. There's a lot more violence, a lot more sex, and also a lot more adult themes like military propaganda and generational debt and generational discrimination. So it's not just about the level of graphic violence that judges whether it's high fantasy or YA. So what does make something YA? Honestly, it's more about what tropes are used in the book and more about what type of stories they're telling. So dealing with becoming an adult, family pressure, your first serious romance, challenging the social order, and defying authority. All things that are common for the age group that it's written for, and these are good stories that deserve to be told. Unfortunately, I think YA is often just a way to market books. It's less about whether the stories are for young adults, and more about how to sell books to young adults. And doing this can also undercut books that don't quite fit the YA mold, because it didn't fit reader expectations. So Poppy War is not YA, despite ticking a few boxes on the YA checklist. I don't think being YA will automatically make something good or bad, but I do think we are more inclined to enjoy a book and find the right book for us if we know what to expect. And unfortunately, the YA label often gets slapped onto the wrong books. So the representation of race and culture is fantastic. You're going to hear that a lot during Discovery December. Everyone is diverse here. But more than that, Rin is dark-skinned and has a rural accent, so she deals with prejudice everywhere she goes. This is not just a story that features a person of colour, it is their story. Gender rep is pretty good as well, with a strong female lead. However, Rin is also kind of the only woman in a major character role. Most of the other major characters are male, so there's a little bit of solo representation here. There is LGBT in the form of clearly gay characters, though it isn't really discussed. Their sexuality doesn't come up in the middle of a war, funnily enough. But I appreciate including them here in a historical setting. It draws light on the fact that gay and trans people have existed for thousands of years in a variety of different cultures. Oh boy, if it wasn't clear by now. Would it be easier if I did this in a song? You know, to take some of the awkwardness off? Would that be inappropriate? Graphic body mutilation, child abuse and child death, physical, emotional and sexual abuse, war crimes, self-harm, drug abuse and torture, strong language violence and cannibalism. The worst part, all of these are straight out of a history textbook. It all happened to real people, so there it is. Please go easy when you're reading this stuff, and if it's too much for you, don't be a hero. It's okay to go read something else that won't traumatize you. Yes, this is a very well written ending. The third book was my favourite, and the quality just kept improving all the way through the series. Just keep in mind, history is complicated and rarely has a Hollywood ending. This is a fair bit messier, much like real history that the story is based off. Keep that in mind. So try the first book. I would say technically it is the weakest of the three while still being fantastic. It also has all the worst of the horror and violence. So if book one is not for you, you've tried enough. But if you can get through book one and you're not off-put by the dark content, you'll be okay to continue on through the end and to enjoy the full version of the Poppy War. So good luck, my friends, and happy reading. Alright, that was my pitch for the Poppy War, and I genuinely hope this has encouraged more people to read it, because it is a fantastic series and the real history involved here is worth knowing. If it does sound like it's too much for you, that's okay. Please go check out one of the other videos on my channel and I will find a book series that is right for you. Coming up next, we are continuing our theme of Discovery December with the Daevabad trilogy. Very similar to the Poppy War in that it's a historical setting, but a little less brutal, though it has its moments, and then going into Children of Blood and Bone after that. You can support this channel by subscribing, interacting with this video in some way, and checking out our shop, Rainbow Space Unicorn, and looking at all of our cutesy merch. Remember to be kind to yourself and to call your therapist. I hope you enjoy a good book today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.